Episode for the storage na ye lawyer Paul Adom akashe na nsem na lawyer Paul Adom said de bia do follow na odi etuja na nsem bi eti ye nsem ni bebre efaye lawyer Paul Adom ho na ye fanso kopi mo ye lawyer Paul Adom akashe de ene nsem efi ho mo benie inne nim say ye nyina ma me chief justice eyadia Yina ye President Mahama, etimi asake no efi eye Parliament House. Na abra sa nyamu we yina be start ne de ho update ne nkomo twetwe yina abre mo. Sentia eye Chief Justice eye yina ye President epese asake no fi o mo so ntumi ne ye twuma ensam ni de bebre. Na ye da kosoro ya afede eye ade eye yina ye President wetimi asake eye Chief Justice efi eye Parliament House. Neno ene ye lawyer Paul Adom ede nsembi abetuja na oya analysis o chechiri mebi mu sentia eye na ye president etumi asake eye chief justice efi eye Parliament House na ebusiafo asemi nu efi ye na enim sem abra asa nsem we ebobaba no eye ade asa okopi mo ye Parliament House am eye ade minority form ho mo ye demonstration ni ade diti ase Omo mpreso se eyiye na ye president wetimi asaka ye chief justice efi homo ejabo eyade a sisi an ye na ye president etimi asaka ye chief justice efi eye Parliament House no enenam sa ene ye lawyer Paul Adom eden sembebre na abetuja sentia ye na ye president wetimi asaka ye chief justice efi eye Parliament House ensamne de aye bebre nti de bia makaje mo se no ena meeting se ya eya mempese me wesota anasa meso me enti kame ho na menu mienu yenkoti eye lawyer Paul Adom na yuria enkomo foforo bi so ewo ho mo asanso de apa abetu aso nsomde de aye bebre ewo oma kanimo bedemase.
So that this conversation, now that couŕt by-election is over, has been won by the NDC, this conversation is going to pick up steam again from tomorrow up until the weekend. It's going to be a big conversation for all the weekend stories. So for young people who watch us, we just want to set the perspective for you. How has the presidency dealt with the disagreement with the head of the judiciary? It's important that in all constitutional regimes, and beginning from 1778, when Montesquieu wrote that book entitled The Spirit of the Laws, the issue about separation of powers, independence of the three arms of government, and some people add the fourth being the media, has become very, very paramount. And it's almost like a measure of how a democratic environment is working, whether the legislative arm is independent of the executive and vice versa, and the judiciary and all of that. Because there's always bound to be tension between the heads of these institutions. One wants something done. The executive has its role to implement policy. The legislature has its role to make law. But you will find that in checks and balances, all of them have a way of, legislature has a way of doing policy or shaping policy or changing policy. The judiciary has a way of changing legislation by using, they call it judge-made law. And when there's judge-made law, it means that the legislature, the judiciary, is taking up the role of the legislature by making law. So these are the tensions there, and that's what really every constitution and the conduct of the constitutional actors is set out to delimit. Okay, so we look at, well, there was 1960, there was 169, 92, 2001, 2017, 18, 2023. Now we have listed in the history of Ghana where there's been these brushes that have happened between especially between the executive president and the judiciary. The first one occurred in 1963. What date was it again? Do they have the date? The date was 11th December 1963. There had been a bomb thrown on Kwame Nkrumah somewhere in Kolungugu in the upper region, as it was then called. And the people involved were some important people who were arrested. The foreign minister, couŕt, was arrested. He used to be interior minister. At that time, he was foreign minister. He was arrested. Tewi Adamafiu, the information minister, was also arrested. The trial was known as the Tewi Adamafiu trial. After the trial, couŕt and Tewi Adamafiu were set free. Others were convicted. His Excellency was not happy with it. So what did he do? He fired sh0ck. sh0ck was the same person who swore Kwame Nkrumah in during his 1960 event, but sh0ck was fired. Nkrumah fired Akuffo for the ruling against the government in the Kulungugu. What happened was Akuffo chaired the panel that said that Terry Adamafio and Akwaje were not guilty of the offense of premeditated murder against the president. On 11 December 1963, they were summarily dismissed by the president. Then the Constitution at the time was sort of quiet on it. So the president acted by removing Akuffo and then passed legislation. So right it here. So Nkrumah rushed a bill to Parliament through his Attorney General, the Honorable Court Swansea, seeking to gain the powers to fire judges. Subsequently, the Parliament passed that law for the Osajefo. So Edward Akufo-Addo was sacked, and also sacked was Kofi Adumoah Bosman and R.S. Blade. They were all fired as Supreme Court judges. So that ended one chapter. Those who wrote the Constitution were eager to stop the president or the leader of the government from being able to remove the Chief Justice. So the 1969 Constitution has no role for the president to remove the Chief Justice. It has no Article 146 process. In fact, the 1969 Constitution went to the other extreme, where the leader of the government, the Prime Minister, can under no circumstance remove a Chief Justice. Nobody can send a petition. That window was completely closed as to whether somebody can send a petition for the removal of the Chief Justice. Given the history that the First Republic came from, the good people of Ghana at the time decided that no, they don't want that. So the only thing that Busia could do, when, of course, the brushes always happen, Busia was concerned about a ruling of the Supreme Court. What was it about? Somebody who had been fired. It was thought that they were Nkrumah people, so the Busia people took over, and they were firing some of the important leaders of the Nkrumah people. They gathered 568 people. They call it the Apollo 568, and they were all given letters to go home. They were chief directors. One of them, Mr. Salah, decided to test the matter at the Supreme Court and said that the Prime Minister and the government cannot sack him. In the ruling, which Salah won, the Supreme Court's justices, the case entitled Salah and Attorney General, the Supreme Court ruled by a majority, Philip Archer in the majority, E.M.P. Sowa in the majority, Apalu, three of them for the majority, Justice Srebo and Justice Enin for the minority. They ruled in favor of the applicant that the Prime Minister cannot sack Mr. Salah. Busia was concerned, but he didn't have the power to sack judges because the system had protected the judges through the provisions of the 1969 Constitution. So what did Busia say? That's Justice Sowa here, that's Justice Apalu here. And then Busia said to the general public that no court can enforce any decision that seeks to compel the government to employ or re-employ anyone. That will be a futile exercise, and I wish to make that perfectly clear. 18th April 1970 is when Prime Minister Busia made the statement. Busia did not have the power to fire the judges, but perhaps if he did, maybe he would have fired somebody, because these things get to high pitch. But it is important that the system works in a way that stops the politicians who can get emotional about some of these things and stops them quite nicely. So that was the experience over there in the Second Republic. Now, let's come to the 1992 Constitution. Suffice it to say, though, that the 1979 Constitution had a provision like Article 146. I think it was Article 125 or something like that. It's in the 1979 Constitution. You can Google and check. Article 124, they are being corrected. It's Article 124 of the 1979 Constitution had a provision very similar to Article 146 that we have today. It allowed the impeachment process, but it was to be guided very, very carefully and used only sparingly in the extreme situations. But enter 1992, where we have an Article 146 process that could herald the removal of a Supreme Court judge or a Chief Justice. On 31st December in the 31st December decision, which was in 1993 actually, Fly Lieutenant Rawlings was unhappy with the ruling. What happened? The Supreme Court gave a verdict, a very damning one, a 5-4 decision in favor of the NPP, which had gone to court to apply that J.J. Rawlings' military coup d'etat that brought him to power, and which of course ended and heralded the 1992 Constitution, cannot continuously be celebrated under a constitutional dispensation. This was the case that was sent to court by Peter Ajete, may he rest in peace, former Speaker of Parliament, and at that time a leading member of the NPP. He later became its chairman. Peter Ajete was successful in the court by a 5-4 decision against the Attorney General that Fly Lieutenant Rawlings' beloved day of his most beloved day in his life as a politician, the day of 31st December, which had been celebrated for 11 years as a holiday, can no longer be celebrated as a holiday. J.J. Rawlings did not take kindly to that, and he had something to say. But you know, the J.J. Rawlings, under the 1992 Constitution, was also precluded from issuing instructions to remove a Chief Justice or to sack a judge. Otherwise, perhaps, he would have sacked Justice N.Y.B. Adade, who marshaled the majority opinion, and we know the story behind that. If you read my book, there's a big story behind that, what happened. We'll get the book for you very soon. Justice Adade would have been fired by Mr. Rawlings if indeed Mr. Rawlings had the power to do so. But the 1992 Constitution did not allow the President to do so, except by an Article 146 process. Mr. Rawlings was not interested in pursuing an Article 146 process. Nobody sent a petition, and so Adade was not sacked. But JJ was very upset about it. Now, this is the majority in the ruling. Adade led the majority opinion. GRM Francois was there. Justice Amoasechi, Justice Akins, and Justice Efron Benjamin, who actually turned the day in favor of the majority opinion on that day. The dissenting opinion was from the Chief Justice Philip Archer, Justice Aban, later a Chief Justice, Justice Joyce Bamford Addo, later a Speaker of Parliament, and Justice Ampere, may he rest in peace. They were the dissenting opinion in the famous matter of 31st. So that now we are in the Fourth Republic. Let's move to see that in 2022-2023, a petition was received by President Akuffo for the removal of Chief Justice Eni Yeboah. It was a petition received by some people. I don't want to go into the details, but we can if we have time later on. And the President Akuffo dismissed the petition. It didn't see the light of day. There was no prima facie, blah, blah, blah. So that was the first time. No, that was the first time. The first time was Justice Kingsley Akwa. This was the second time that a petition had been received by the President. Justice Kingsley Akwa's petition was in J.A. Kufuor's time, and this petition was in Akufo-Addo's time, both of them MPP era. So Akufo-Addo dismissed that petition. Then came another one, and the tail end of Akufo-Addo's administration came another one for the removal of Justice Tokonu from Kweku Azar, our friend whose document we looked at the other day. Kweku Azar wrote to the President concerned about Justice Tokonu, and President Akufo-Addo went through the process, replied to the general public, sent